So in the reading corner today, I have a very special guest with me. It's Peter Kalu, who is a poet, novelist, playwright, and indeed film scriptwriter too. We're talking about his book, One Drop, which is the second book in an unusual trilogy because the books have all been written by different writers. The first one was published last year, written by Melvin Burgess, and it was called 3 Bullets. The thing that connects these stories is that they're all set in the same world, a world that feels as though it could possibly be just around the corner, but is set in the future. Now, I read Peter's author's note at the end, and he talks about that relationship with Tariq and Melvin. And one of the things he says is that it started from Tariq asking that big writer question, what if? So in a way, I'd like to start there, Peter, first of all, by welcoming you, but also to ask you what that what if meant, both in terms of this world that you've created, but for your story.
Yes, I think we all start as writers with the what ifs when we get into fiction, creating new worlds, exploring possibilities. And I think because it was quite a dystopian vision, the what ifs were quite grim, you might say. So in my case, the what ifs I used were, what if you became illegal? What if the love you had, which was deep and true, became illegal? What if the UK became a chaotic, fragmented, sectarian place on a par with Syria? What if the far right, with Trumpian, Johnsonian energies, and with Elon Musk's innovation and inventions, seized power or partial power? And what if they set up camps and attempted to indoctrinate people, not by the process of wearing them down, but by simply implanting chips, SIM cards into their heads, and then using those SIM cards to rewrite people's memories and rewrite their sense of self? If that occurred, how would some resistance form? What would be necessary in order for people to retain their sense of identity and to retain their memories, and to, in that way, have sufficient strength to resist, to rebel, and to fight back? And could that fight back win out against this hostile regime that is built on hate? Could love win through, or would the forces of hate be overwhelming? So that's the bleak vista of what ifs.
And you've captured in all of your what ifs there the very big issues that underpin this novel. Of course, you've got to agree to some extent to some parameters, because the three of you have set your novels in this world. What were the bits that you had to kind of stick to as a writer?
Well, again, this was a lovely negotiation between the three of us, because my previous speculative fiction novel was set maybe 1,000 years from now. And so there are very, very few anchors to my imagination in terms of 1,000 years from now. You're pretty much building an entirely new world. Whereas Melvin's practice, his novels in the past have been set, I would say, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And so there is a very great closeness between the world that we create in that kind of near future and this world here. And so most of the negotiation consisted of Tariq and Melvin telling me that I could not do things and that this would not exist yet. And the compromise we reached was the compromise where the technology, the rewrite technology, they agreed to allow it to happen. That was a fierce argument. But the political structures, the economic backgrounds, the geography, the technology, and the military forces, those environments were all quite close to what exists currently. And so you do get that rather terrifying idea that this isn't that far away.
Yeah. And of course, a story is not just big ideas, it's about people and it's about characters. And at the heart of your story, two very strong characters, Axel and Dune. So maybe tell us a bit about these two characters.
Axel and Dune, outside of the camp, are friends, school friends, who become more than that, who become partners, who stumble, if you like, into a relationship. And they build a world of love, of care and compassion, of jokes, fun, joking, a typical mid-teen environment and world. And insofar as their love is not orthodox, or their gender presentations are not necessarily orthodox, they do meet some hostility, but they're well able to cope with it, and their love for each other takes them through. Outside of the camp, the strictures, the pressures that start to close in on them do start to disrupt in some ways that relationship, and they become more and more fractured in how they relate to each other. But nevertheless, they hold together well. And then, of course, they suddenly captured by the Bloods, the right-wing forces that are prevailing in the Britain that we create, and thrown into the prison camp. And at that point, their relationship undergoes its most severe test. So that's really where they're at. Can their love hold out? And is it strong enough? Can they be strong enough for each other to withstand the attacks on their identity, on their relationship, on their memories, on their minds?
Because this camp does affect them in different ways. And the camp is called a peace camp. It's no more a peace camp than the camps in Poland were labor camps. You know, it's that same. And actually, there are lots of things that if you know about the history of those death camps, those extermination camps, there's a lot of similarity in how these camps are run. Were you drawing on that?
There are many dire, grim examples of this use of an oppression, and I'm attempting to force a people or numerous individuals to conform to the ruling diktat. And so, yeah, I was aware of those things. And I don't think I consciously attempted to model what I was doing on any one form of camp. I was just aware of the idea of the camp and on the idea. I guess in contemporary times, these the asylum seeker holding places. I think most recently they were talking about shipping people to Rwanda, and there are examples in Manchester of refugees, asylum seekers going for appointments and then essentially just disappearing. And so it's an extrapolation or a base point from these near examples and the ones further back in history.
You said that you started with a different beginning, because this opens straight into the camp. How did it start before?
Nikki, we'll go down the rabbit hole with that one, but I will tell you, it started with the London Wind, which was it was inside the camp, and it was a scene. The way I write often is I get key scenes. I have key moments which I know need to be in this story, and I always write those moments. I don't really care too much about the way in which the linearity of the novel, the way the novel's going to flow from the beginning to the end. I kind of sort that out last, but I start with what really grits me, moves me, and feels poignant and apposite. And that was the London Wind chapter. And as the editorial process went on, this London Wind chapter moved further and further and further back. It was quite funny. And so I was writing it using a piece of software that allowed you to shuffle the chapters anyway, very quickly. And the idea behind that was that the reader, if they use the software, wouldn't have to read the story in the order that the God known as the author puts them, the chapters. They can shuffle it, or randomness can enter and it gets shuffled. I was hoping that the story would work whichever way the chapters were shuffled. And the sort of philosophical point around that is that we don't exist in the present all the time. We exist in the future and in the past and the present. And at any one moment, we may be in all three places. But that's very hard to write up in a novel, in a paper novel, so digital seemed to be the better form.
You mentioned the sort of technology side of things, and it occurs to me that all wars, all instances of oppression like this, often technology is being invented for that very purpose or being repurposed. But here the technology, it doesn't seem so unbelievable. It does seem as though it could be just around the corner.
There's a book that when I came across it, it's called Drone Theory. I think it's by Shamayu, if I remember his name rightly. And it was a revelation, the things that drones could do, and the software, the AI, the artificial intelligence methods by which drones were being fed data and were being empowered, if that's the right word, allowed to make decisions. And I was shocked and amazed, and a lot of the information around drones in that book I've used in OneDrop.
Tell us a little bit more about these chips and how the drones affect them.
It's a combination of technologies in which you've got visual identification methods, you've got gait recognition methods, you've got near field sensors, which is like your chip, your credit cards, or your debit cards. It's a combination of these information systems in terms of what the drones are looking to hoover up, but it's also fed data, and so it uses network analysis, like who meets who, where, and from that it can draw on a database and say, okay, if 99 times out of 100. When a person meets another person in this kind of place carrying this kind of object with this kind of gait, the following happens. Therefore, we don't need to examine whether that following thing is going to happen this time. We can just intervene before it does happen. So these almost AI decisions being made by drones, which do not necessitate, if that's the right word, any human intervention. But in terms of the book and what the drones in the book are doing, they're working on the idea that the chips in the heads of the people who are in the prison camps can be accessed by the drones, and the drones feed directly into those chips memories, ideas, which are the ideas of the ruling powers, the people who control those drones. And at the same time, those drones also via the chip inhibit other memories which may counter the memories that they want to implant. So it's a complex process, and the theory around the way in which this rewriting is combated is that the memories which have the most emotion attached to them are the memories which get most deeply embedded in human beings' memory systems, and so they're the hardest to erase. And also that memory is held not just by one individual, but the sense of self that an individual has is comprised not just of their own memories of their self, but of other people's memories of them. That idea, and this is another deep dive, is something that I picked up from Adriana Caballero, an Italian philosopher. And who we are, Shiakus, is very much a matter of what stories are told about us. And this is why there is so much storyfying in the novel, that these memories and the stories told about memories is not just a nice way of recalling the past. They're actually a means by which an identity can be fixed, can be maintained, and that identity can resist the imposition of anything from the drones, any new other identity.
Which brings us to the idea of resistance, because resistance can happen in a number of ways, one of which is through the memories. We are our memories. That's what you've just said. That's a quote from the book. It can come from trying to get counter technology so that you can destroy the technology that's there, or good old-fashioned catapulting it down, that kind of physical resistance.
Absolutely.
And there's all three of those things going on in this story.
I think in the 60s, there was the consciousness-raising movement in which, people would sit together and tell their stories. And I always felt that the power of that was phenomenal. And it's something that we neglect a little nowadays in this sort of social media world. But that idea of coming together and building identity, it sits in some of the work of Alice Walker and of Toni Morrison as well, I think. And it's an important part of maybe what was the Black consciousness movement and the Black Power movement, and the retaining a sense of self that is not the sense being imposed upon us by the state. And that's always been part of, I think, that cultural efforts.
By some of the references that you make early on to key people, so they're the in people and the out people. Marilyn Monroe is there as a kind of former civil rights supporter. And you also mentioned Audre Lorde, who was an amazing activist that I think perhaps some readers won't have heard about.
Well, Audre Lorde's works and her voice and the idea, the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. Many of her thoughts are relevant today, important today, and some of these this thinking is seeded through One Drop. Not in a didactic, heavy way. You might pick them up, you might not. And of course, in the editorial process, those who may not recognize the contributions of these characters or the people would query them. So I do remember specifically that there was a small skirmish around Marilyn Monroe, whether to include her. He's like, well, why have you put her in that? And I was like, well, look at her history. Look what she did. Forget the movies. Look what she did. Look how she stood up with Ella Fitzgerald when Ella Fitzgerald was under attack and discriminated against. Marilyn Monroe, she had a backbone. She was a fighter, and that is the history of Marilyn Monroe that matters to the Black community. But I do like when I write to plant things and for people to, if they don't get it, it's like to just Google it. It's only 2 minutes away nowadays. You don't have to go off to a big library like I did when I was a kid and find the Encyclopedia Britannica. And it's a journey of discovery. The novel's a journey of discovery, and there are many, many instances where there are echoes of voices. And
I'm guessing Elizabeth X must be a nod to Malcolm X.
Yes, that's true. Well, there is the idea of X is, of course, of an identity erased. And so Malcolm X, his point, as I understand it, was that owing to slavery, one of the things that slavery did was suppress, erase historical connections, historical identities. And so that X stands for everything that is erased. So it has a resonance with Malcolm X, the Elizabeth X takes on that name not just for the reference with Malcolm X, but for what Malcolm X was saying in turn around how our identities have been erased.
We have to talk about One Drop, which is, after all, the title of the book. The mantra that they are encouraged to repeat. I have one drop of white blood in my veins, and that is the drop I worship. That Axel's mother tries to encourage him to be able to repeat, not because she wants him to repeat it, but because she feels it will save his life. And that will chime with anybody who has brought up, young Black men in areas where they get very negative attention, training children to behave in certain ways and to erase their identity in order not to, to survive.
Yeah. I do remember there was an article by Gary Young, the journalist and now professor, who he wrote about how his very young child, 5-6-year-old child in America, he'd walked him and things had happened as he'd been walking with the child. And the child had asked Dad to go a different way this time. And Gary Young was shocked that even at that young age, our behaviors, the way in which we navigate the world, is being influenced by that acknowledgement, that perception of that racism is a force that we're going to have to deal with. It's an awful thing. I think just recently with my daughter, and she was doing a sketch, we're fooling around as usual, but somehow the sketch turned into her holding a gun. And I was like, no, we're in a public place. We are not allowed to hold anything that looks like that. The other kids can, but not you. And yeah, it's a shocking thing to have to start censoring and suggesting people modify their behavior because of their blackness, because of their skin color, and the way in which police can react to that presence of skin color plus whatever the other factor is. So yeah, it's these talks that parents give. Yeah, they're poignant and kind of abrasive of our sense that everything is fine, everything's all right. And what I was trying to do in the early parts of the novel, in those parts which are pre-camp, is give a sense of that incipient danger, of that creeping danger, and the modifications that happen slowly.
Yes, definitely. And in fact, I think it's Axel's father that says a fish does not know the meaning of water, which is really what you're describing for us there, that when you're in it, you don't see it, you don't feel it. It's that sort of creeping up on you idea. But it's not an entirely bleak novel because of the love that underpins it. And I wondered whether now would be a really good time for you to read a little bit to us.
Yes, absolutely. The counterweight to the bleak scenarios is the love story, and is the great love and my attempt to describe the love and the care, the relationship that Axel and Dune have, and how love, in the cliche, can see us through so many things. And that was the hope that's in the novel. The hope is represented by the love that Axel and Dune share. And so, yes, let me read from the wagon, and it's a scene pre the camp. The wagon. We left the car in the mud patch of a tractor turning point. Mum took out a large canvas bag and veered west into a field of baled straw that had a slight incline and became a conifer forest. Dad took us due east across the same field and kept us going, telling us not to turn around. Soon we were among tree trunks and dragonflies. There was a stream running through the trees where dark pools held shoals of finger-length silverfish. Small black biting flies hovered above the stream water. We kept on, and as the trail got rockier, Dad started huffing with the cool box, but would not let us help him. We made it past the last tree line of the woods and into a clearing that was almost lawn. Dad got the cool box opened. It was maybe a fake picnic, but there was no reason not to enjoy it. A fish does not know the meaning of water, Dad began in his sage on the mountain tone as the lid of the cool box hinged back. The air was dry, with flecks of hay occasionally flicking across. Is that right? Dune said, grabbing a chicken drumstick. Yes, said Dad. Think about it. Being a fish, being always in water, a fish has no awareness of not water to compare with the state of being in water. Carry on, said Dune, then took another piece of chicken. Dune was an Olympic eater, and you had to be fast around him. Dad hesitated, but found his mojo. My point is, we are sometimes immersed in things and have no awareness we are immersed in them. Like now, with the rise of fascism. I got attacked last week, said Dune. What happened, said Mum. She'd rejoined us, minus the canvas bag. Nothing, the usual. Some randoms threw a punch at me. I hit them and back and ran. Was it Bloods, Mum pressed? Yeah, Bloods cadets. You know you're fam to us, Dune said, Dad. Are you adopting me? Might as well, I joked, seeing as you spend most of the time around ours. And Dune is welcome, said Dad. I trust them with my life. Dune nodded. Their eyes flicked at the chicken Dad was holding. Makes you fam, right? Said Dad, biting on the last spicy chicken wing. Now, I might just lie back, close my eyes and bathe in this sunlight like a fish in water. Dad rested his head on Mum's stomach. You two, don't wander off, said Mum. Appreciate nature. Look at these beautiful fields yonder. Yonder? I quizzed. Yes, yonder, confirmed Mum. She was a trained librarian. She knew these kinds of words. She wagged a finger vaguely at the dark greenery around us. Dad had this amazing ability to go to sleep at the drop of a chewed chicken bone, and he was soon snoring. Mum's eyelid fell too. June edged closer. Me and June watched the countryside around us for about 3 seconds. Then it was clear that the open air and sun and stuff had got June frisky. They began rubbing me. This was nuts. I trapped their hands. June turned onto their chest. Your dad's getting old, they said. See how he struggled with the cool box? He's not old, he's unfit. All the days he spends staring at screens. What about me? Am I fit? June said. I grinned into the grass. This was June all over, fishing for compliments. Good try, I said, but this conversation has now ended. The sky was sheer silk blue. The fields were a patchwork of colours in pastel tones of brown and green and yellow, ruffling from the horizon towards us, all the way up to the broad, grey zip fastener of the road. Then after that, larger and larger patches of flowing green fields, right up to where my head was now resting on June's softly rising and falling stomach, as my hand kept theirs wandering. I had my eyes half closed, so my eyelashes played with the sun's rays, when I heard this distant rumbling sound. I looked up. It was coming from the road. The sight confused me. I sat up to see it clearer. I thought it was scarecrows at first, stacked vertically in the back of one of those farmers' wagons with the steel-slatted upper bodies that are towed by tractors. But as I looked more closely, I saw it was human beings, not scarecrows. Every one of them dark-skinned, tall, nappy-headed, and dressed in rough clothes. They were stood up in the wagon, being jolted and jostled as it towed along the road at some speed by a camouflage-coloured Land Rover. I called out, waving to them. I was far enough away that they might not see me or hear me, but I thought at least one of them might. None waved back or even lifted their hands as they went past. I nudged June and they woke, saw what I saw. I shouted again, more urgently at them. Dad stirred, mumbling, "What are you shouting about?" "The wagon. There were all these people, black people, crammed into the back like chickens in a cage," I said to him. "They were ghost people, Dad. They didn't shout or move. They looked like they were tied up and they had dead eyes." "Where?" "It's gone now." "Dead eyes? How could you see their eyes from here?" "I don't know, Dad. They were scary." "You sure? Maybe you were dreaming." "Yes, I'm sure." "Dude." "Yep. Black people in the back of a wagon, tied up." "I saw it too," June confirmed. Mum stirred now. "We need to get back. Phone this in. I've heard reports. It's the immigrant lot campaign. They had vans out saying they were going to round people up hiding in the countryside that didn't have the right papers." By the time we were back on the estate, it was dark. Mum was on the phone for ages. Then she came down and wedged me between her knees and began oiling and cornrowing my hair without even asking. A newsflash came up on the TV. Another big bomb had gone off, this time in Leeds.
Wow. So, Peter, I know that your daughter has been a bit involved in this story as well. I'd love to know a little bit more about the music that connects with the piece that you've just read to us.
Yes, it came about quite by serendipity. I think my daughter's always sung. She picked up guitar and started playing piano and stuff. And so during lockdown, we started to write songs together. And I was working on One Drop during that time too. So the song started to get incorporated into the novel, or the novel text became the sort of grist for songs. And eventually we composed 2 or 3 songs, and she's started to record them, and she performed one of the songs, which I call Heavenly Sky. She calls The Last Sky, at a recent launch in Jam Street in Manchester.
Wonderful. Actually, I should just say that we get the sort of glimmer of the sky in the episode that you've just read, you know, the reference to the blue sky, which is obviously used ironically in other places in the novel too. You know, thank you so much for coming into the Reading Corner and telling us more about One Drop. I feel we scraped the surface of something very deep. You've got so much to say, and maybe we'll be able to chat again.
I'd love that.
In the Reading Corner is presented by Nikki Gamble and produced by Alison Hughes. This episode is generously sponsored by Anderson Press. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review. If you would like to find out about other events and courses, visit justimagine.co.uk. Join us again in the Reading Corner on your favourite podcast platform.